Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for joining today for AWS Los Angeles section webinar town hall meeting. Today have a wonderful, very hot topic, very exciting topic, and with a top distinguished speaker. First of all, some logistics. This is the webinar, but you happen to be in the Longdale Library. We have a small conference room here. I'm with our public policy chair, Daniel. Yes, you can see him. Speaker camera. Oh, okay. Yeah, I think.
He's saying the presenter camera, not
Yeah.
camera.
Well, we'll switch to whoever is presenting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so please enjoy the event today and any logistics. Oh, this meeting is being recorded, and we'll do some screenshot with the permission from the speaker. So please be aware. And Daniel will make some announcements. So I'm turning it over to Daniel, who is our public policy chair and the safety, USC aviation safety specialist. So hi, Daniel. So I'm turning this to you.
Hello, everybody. As Ken mentioned, my name is Daniel Scalise. I'm the program administrator at the University of Southern California's Aviation Safety and Security Program, where Mr. Gazzetti teaches. And just one other programming note: if you are attending for FAA Safety Team's Wings credit, just make sure to send us your email. If the email you use for your FAA Wings FAA Safety Team account. If it's a different email address, they won't be able to match your email address with you. So just make sure it's that account. And then without further ado, we'll get started. I'd like to introduce, I'll introduce Mr. Jeff Gazzetti. He is currently a consultant and proprietor of Gazzetti Aviation, a consultancy firm for aviation safety and accident investigation issues. He is also an instructor in 2 classes at the University of Southern California Aviation Safety and Security Program, including our aircraft accident investigation class that we've been running some Friday for the last 72 years. And finally, was most recently the director of the FAA's Accident Investigation Division, FAA 100, and was with the National Transportation Safety Board, Cessna Aircraft, and the U.S. Navy before that. Without further ado, let's see if I can put the camera on Jeff here.
Yeah, yeah. A spotlight.
Yep.
Okay.
1 second, Jeff. Oh, no.
You don't click on his.
Yep.
Upper here, the dot.
Can I stop? Should I stop share?
Nope. It's all yours.
All right. Well, good morning and good afternoon, everyone. It's afternoon here in the Washington, D.C. area. I'm on the East Coast. And it's really a pleasure and a privilege to have been invited to speak to AIAA. I'm a degreed aeronautical engineer myself. I participated in AIAA events before, and I'm very flattered. Your Los Angeles section is very active and well known, and I certainly appreciate it. I'm not going to go into my biography, only to say I have 40 years of aviation accident investigation experience with various entities. But I've been retired for the last 6 years now. And I just kind of work part-time. I do mostly teaching for USC. I love to teach about safety. I love to talk about aviation safety and accident investigation. And I also want to mention that Daniel at USC is awesome. He's always been a great friend to me and every other instructor at the University of Southern California's Aviation Safety and Security School. And it's a privilege to be part of that school. And Daniel is such a warm, intelligent, and helpful person that, Daniel, I wanted to thank you for not only moderating this, but also just for your professionalism and your passion for aviation safety. And so before I hop into the presentation, I just want to say that it's going to be kind of a stream of consciousness thought for me talking about these things, but I'm going to keep my presentation to 45 minutes because I really, really, really want to answer questions and have a discussion with you, whether it be through chat or however Daniel wants to moderate it. I don't want to just drone on and on and on. I mean, I could. I've got plenty of accident case studies, but I'm going to keep myself to 45 minutes and then answer as many questions as possible. So I'm going to attempt. So there's the cover slide there. And so Daniel, if anything goes amiss, let me know if you can't see anything. I do have a couple of embedded videos into my presentation, but they should turn out just right.
We'll be here. Thank you, Jeff.
Okay. So here's the next slide. Bottom line up front. So this is just kind of an outline of what I'm going to talk about, what my message is. The title of this forum was the State of Aviation Safety and Accident Investigators' Perspective. Well, overall, I think the state of aviation safety is excellent, right? I know that we've had recent accidents, but I still think it's excellent and it's getting better. Accident findings spur action by the industry, right? So whenever an aviation accident or serious incident occurs, the industry rises to the occasion. Back in the day when I started at the NTSB in the early 90s, we experienced a half a dozen U.S. commercial airline accidents fatal each year in this country. It was really just when I look back and think about that, it's just incredible. And we learned a lot from those accidents, a lot of low-hanging fruit. But then at the same time, the evolution of data collection, safety management systems, voluntary reporting programs really got that down. And I'll talk about that. And to the point where accidents are so rare now that when they do happen, they get a lot of attention, especially in this 24-hour news cycle, social media, viral videos. So there's a lot of heightened sensitivity to any kind of aviation accident. But a part of the I guess the in my view an unreasonable alarm from the public is that everyone kind of lumps these things together. They lump together a scheduled Part 121 commercial airline accident with a air tour helicopter that comes apart over New York City, when the two things are completely different. So we'll talk a little bit about that in my presentation. We'll talk about how data analytics and safety management systems is the key to the future of aviation safety. And, if there is a common thread in what I see with accidents that recur, it's complacency, right? An accident occurs, people are all attentive about it, they're vigilant, but then over the years, there's no accidents and people get complacent, and then you have another accident that occurs. So if there's any common thread, it would be complacency, in my view. And we all must remain vigilant, and we need to be professional whenever we learn about accidents and whenever we learn about incidents. So that's kind of the bottom line up front. So let me just kind of jump into the presentation. So first of all, I'm an accident investigator, and according to ICAO, the sole objective of the investigation of an accident or incident shall be the prevention of accidents and incidents. It's not the purpose of this activity to apportion blame or liability. So people have to keep that in mind, especially aviation professionals and engineers like you all. This isn't a blame game. This isn't throwing someone under the bus. This isn't finding, the probable cause du jour. This is conducting an investigation to determine the cause and to make recommendations to prevent future action. So I'm just going to start there. It's a very important concept. So what does safety look like? Well, what is safety? Is it regulatory compliance? Is it the complete absence of dangers or risks? Is it the complete absence of accidents or incidents? Is it avoiding errors? Well, we can't, the only way to completely eliminate accidents is to not fly. And obviously that's not an option. We have to control the risks that are inherent in aviation, right? And if you control that risk, and those risks are deemed acceptable given the environment of the need for commercial aviation and aviation in general, then it's an inherently safe system. Safety is a systems property. It can only be determined for the whole system of an operation. One thing I want to impart upon you is there is never just one cause and then there's nothing else. You know, it's usually several causes and then contributing factors. There's the James Reason Swiss cheese model, which I'll quickly present here in a moment for those of you that aren't familiar with it. But it's a systems property. So I'm going to talk a little bit about data and data sharing. The FAA has a program called ASIAS, Aviation Safety Information Analysis and Sharing, and this is a database held by the MITRE Corporation under the contract of the FAA because the FAA doesn't have the data, and it has all kinds of voluntary safety data, ASAP reports, air traffic control radar tracks, ADS-B data, NTSB accident data, FAA. It's a massive data repository, and investigators use that to help predict hotspots that could occur in the future. And so I'll talk a little bit more about that. I just wanted to put that out there right now. So this is a kind of where I want to start. This is a historical chart showing U.S. commercial airline fatal accident rate. Okay, so this is the rate, and you see it's the red. It's in the red. So that's the fatal accident rate per 1 million departures. And you can see ever since 1983, when it was all the way up there, where you had a rate of about 700 per 1 million departures, you know, and this chart only goes up to like 2012, 2013. But look how it dropped down to 300. You know, so there's been a massive reduction in the commercial airline fatal accident rate. And that is due to the industry partnering with associations like AIA, partnering with airlines, with government. And there's something called the Commercial Aviation Safety Team, CAST. And CAST, since its inception in the 90s, got everyone together. And instead of waiting for an accident and then waiting for the recommendations and for waiting for the FAA regulations, everyone got together and voluntarily implemented safety change. And it was a game changer in terms of making commercial airlines incredibly safe. And the reason CAST was born is because aircraft manufacturers like Boeing and others saw, they said with the number of increasing population, the number of flights increasing, the number of airplanes being produced, if we keep the same accident rate as we had in the 80s and 90s, we're going to be losing a commercial airliner once a week somewhere around the world when we get into the 2000s. And so that's completely unacceptable. The public would not accept that. And so CAST was formed to do something about it. And it's been very, very helpful. So we've come a long way. When I started, we had ValueJet, TWA Flight 800, Swissair Flight 111. I mean, I can't, there's so many of them, all the US Air accidents that occurred back in the 90s. And it just amazes me when I think back how the public semi-tolerated that, because if we had that same spate of accidents occur again, heads would be rolling, airlines would go out of business, aircraft would be grounded, designs would be grounded. So we've come a long way. The public is now used to a very safe system, and that's why these things get so much visibility now. So I got to start from, this whole recent fear about the sky is falling really started with in 2018 at the 737 MAX accidents, right? I mean, that was shocking. I was with the FAA for the first one in Indonesia, and I actually was going to retire shortly thereafter, but I stayed on for a few months to help the agency work its way through working with the NTSB and the Indonesian government. And it's a brand new design, Boeing. And then another one happened 4.5 months later, killing everybody. Yes. Now, flash forward 7 years from now, we all know what happened now. It was a Boeing design deficiency with the angle of attack indicator. The FAA and that in the certification was a bit asleep at the switch. Boeing didn't handle the response to the accident initially in an appropriate manner in terms of what it told the public. And then there were congressional hearings, there were investigations. But in the end, it was much more than just a design deficiency. It involved other factors like the Lion Airlines knew that this was a problem aircraft for many days and weeks before the accident. And even the previous flight before the accident flight, they were the airplane was pitching wildly uncontrolled, but they were able to manage to get it back down on the ground in Jakarta. So you would think you'd get off the plane and say, this plane is possessed, we're not going anywhere. Instead, 6 hours later, they loaded up a bunch of passengers and they took off again. So I think the airline has to assume some blame for this. Same with the one in Ethiopia. This is 4.5 months after the Indonesian one, where there was an airworthiness directive issued about trim runaway and everything like that. But this crew took off, and yes, the design flaw was a factor, but there were some operational issues. They kept the throttles up the whole time. And in the end, they did not follow the checklist that came out as a result of the airworthiness directive that occurred that was issued right after the Lion Air accident. So it's easy to just throw Boeing under the bus. It's easy to say it was a design issue and an FAA issue, but there's always many more factors involved. But these were two crowd killers, right? They got a lot of attention. Boeing has probably, paid about $30 billion in lost revenue and lawsuits and everything like that. So it was a real shock to the system with regards to commercial airline design, and lessons are still being learned from it. In fact, as a result of those two accidents, I was asked to be part of Academy of Sciences study to look into how a transport airplane risk assessment methodology is conducted. And we learned a few things. We learned a few things about human factors and what is considered an average pilot. And what about the bells and whistles and alarms that go off? Can't that be a distraction to the crew that's trying to solve a problem? And shouldn't designers keep that in mind when they're designing new systems? And so the rules are being changed from that. I helped present the findings at an AIAA annual symposium in 2022 in Chicago. And I learned a heck of a lot from a lot of people smarter than me about how the nuclear regulatory industry works, about how other industries do safety. And we've learned a lot, and that will make aviation safer. So flash forward now to this most recent spate of accidents that has everyone's attention. So it seemed like after the 737 accidents occurred, things kind of calmed down a bit, right? You didn't hear about too many fatal airline accidents, but then last year in December, just 3 months ago, Jeju Air Flight 221 crashed. Another Boeing 737, but guess what? It was not a MAX. It was an older model 800. It was approaching Muan. There was a bird strike that occurred, forced landing, and it struck an earthen berm, right? So it was an international accident, right? So this was not a U.S. air carrier. It was South Korean, but still, and it's still under investigation. We really don't know what happened yet, but we know some things. And in fact, so there was some news media attention about this. And I want to play just some snippets of myself. I'm an NBC News analyst, and I'm not showing these snippets to try to, be a showman. I'm showing these snippets to let you know the challenge I have in talking journalists off the ledge with regard to, the sky is falling. So I think here's the first little snippet. And this also, by the way, provides a little instruction to you all about how the United States gets involved in international aviation accidents. So Daniel, I'm going to attempt to play this, and you tell me if the audience will be able to hear the volume.
We need to share computer sound.
We don't not hear it, Jeff. I think that's the share computer sound setting.
Okay.
No, I think if you go up to the top and you should see in the menus, in the share menu, there should be a share sound option.
Okay, stand by. Sorry.
Don't think I can do that one for you.
No,
Yep. Share sound option. You are screen sharing. Okay. Give me just a second here. Oh, here's
for him.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not
let's
seeing.
let's stop the screen share, Jeff, and then when you try the screen share again, it's a little more it's easier to find.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Just a moment. No, I can't stop it.
Okay. Now if you
All right.
Now if you go to share, on the very right hand side, there'll be an options for share sound and optimize video sharing. Click both of those.
Screens, documents, advanced. Share sound and optimize video. Gotcha.
I wish Zoom has not.
Thank God for Daniel Scalis. All right, so I'm going to try it again. Let me know if this works, okay?
Why the South Koreans needed to bring in American
You can hear it.
expertise in this case, and what will those investigators be looking for?
Good afternoon, Christina. Well, the U.S.'s arrival is really normal protocol for any international accident. Any country that has an interest in an aviation accident has a right to participate in the investigation. In this case, the United States is the state of design and manufacture of the airframe and the engine, Boeing and GE. So they're participating to assist the South Koreans. South Koreans are leading the investigation. The accident happened on their soil, but other countries that have a stake in it have a right to participate in it. So you can be sure that the FAA, the NTSB, Boeing, General Electric will be on scene to provide technical assistance to the South Koreans, because they're going to have a lot of questions about flight recorders and engine performance and things like that.
I didn't realize that was standard, but I guess it makes sense to have the manufacturer, to have those teams on board close by in case the South Korean investigators have specific questions. I also want to ask you, Steve Patterson mentioned there are new reports of an issue with the landing gear of a second Jeju Airlines plane. What does that mean to you, and where does that take the investigation?
Christina, I don't really think this has any import to the investigation. This was apparently an annunciator light that went off after takeoff. It's a light that tells the crew that the nose gear and the main landing gear have been retracted. Sometimes those lights fail. And in this case, that apparently was the case. So they simply turned right back around. They landed, and they confirmed that the landing gear was fine. It was likely an annunciator light, which happens frequently in the airline. I shouldn't say frequently, but it occasionally happens in commercial airline service. So okay, let me screen share. Can you still see me, Daniel? Daniel?
Yes, the taskbar on this computer uncovers the microphone, but yes, we can see you.
All right, great. Thanks. Let me go back. Previous, here we go. So then after the Jeju flight, right, exactly 1 month later, you had the American Airlines Flight 5342, the midair collision over Washington, D.C. And that was a CRJ airliner that crashed with an Army helicopter pilot. You can see the approximate courses, and then you can see a Jennifer Homendy, the chair of the NTSB, giving a press conference talking about how this helicopter route passed just underneath the final approach corridor of runway 33. And they talked about how for the last 15 years, once a month, they would get a close call on this. And that was data that existed that no one, I guess, properly mined. But still, it was a fatal commercial airline accident. Did it have anything to do with the design of the airplane? No. Did it have anything to do with the design of the helicopter? Not really. It had everything to do with how the system was set up and what was known before the accident. There was also some, what the effect of the controller could have been involved, but we just don't know yet. A lot of people wanted to just throw the controller under the bus. They wanted to throw the helicopter pilot under the bus, but there's much more to this. And here's another video clip where I attempt to discuss that.
Here, as we've learned, there was only one controller in the control tower at the time. That's not optimal per FAA, but it is allowable. How big of an issue is staffing at the ATC, not just at DCA, but nationwide?
Well, it's a big issue nationwide overall. There is, there are a couple of thousand controllers short nationwide. With regards to this particular accident, it's too early to tell. This notion of the one controller handling two positions, that's fairly common. And actually, you don't need coordination if you have better situational awareness as a single controller. But still, the congestion around DC is something that needs to be mitigated. Right. And I think the FAA took a good step yesterday.
I flew out of DCA last night. Here, as we've learned, there was only one controller.
Let me go to next. So then, right after that, a couple of days after, you may recall a Learjet that crashed. All kinds of viral video showing this Learjet come screaming out of the sky near Philadelphia. 2 days after the collision, and that really threw gasoline on the public and the news media's desire to feel like the sky was falling. But this was not an airliner. This was a business jet. It was a charter operation, but it wasn't a scheduled one. It was a unique operation involving air medical transport. 6 people were killed, lots of dramatic video. And again, the news media was just saying, what's happening here? Because they had video, and it happened right after the Jeju and mid-air collision. Then, February 6th, less than a week later, you had another. This was a scheduled airliner, but it was operated under Part 135, which are less rigorous than the Part 121 major airlines operate under. February 6, 2025, scheduled domestic flight to Nome. It was a Cessna 208 single-engine turboprop. And the NTSB preliminary report is out on this, and it was 1,000 pounds overweight. And it was flying in moderate icing conditions. So, and it was an Alaska operation, which is very unique. So I was on the news again. This is, I think, my last clip that I'm going to show you. It's very brief.
Question, like, it is a very natural thing if you're at home or just reading through the headlines here. 3 major aviation mishaps, 3 major crashes back to back. Like, there's got to be something going on. And when you look at the details here, at least for us that have covered it, I mean, is there anything that you see that is similar or any connective tissue here? Or is this just, a coincidence of tragedy?
Gaddy, I think it's the latter, not the former. Looking at all 3 of these accidents, all 3 are very different. There might be some common denominator that investigators will pick out of it, but I really doubt it. You couldn't have 3 completely different types of accidents. A mid-air collision, a high velocity impact in a business jet, and then this single engine turboprop mysteriously, dropping out of the sky, operating in Alaska, which, as you indicated, is a very unique operating environment. So I don't see any connective tissue. These things happen in fits and spurts at times. They're unpredictable, but I still think the public should feel safe in flying commercial aircraft.
Yeah, we'll take those.
So, excuse me.
Question, like it is a very
Oh, sorry about that. I just swapped out here.
Yeah. Oh, so Jeff, I think if you go over to the more settings on the right, on the top right, the
Got
more
it.
should be something. If you click on that, should be a
Right.
hide floating media controls. You can click on that.
Okay,
All
I
right.
did.
And then on the upper left for display settings, second one over right there, you can swap. There you go.
How's that?
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, good.
Everything is human factors.
That's right. All right. So then after this, after that accident on February 17th, 2025, a Delta Connection flight 4819. Again, viral video showing this airplane landing at Toronto. Very hard landing, and the wing ripped off. The airplane turns over, but guess what? No one dies. Really a miracle, but it was definitely a hull loss of a U.S. commercial airline industry. So, but it wasn't a midair collision. It wasn't struck by something. This is where, there likely are operational concerns as to why this airplane came down so hard. You had the first officer flying, you had the captain monitoring, you had a semi-snow covered whiteout type runway. Was depth perception? We don't know. But that again, that fuels the fire. And even though this it's the other thing. Some media said, "Oh, it happened in Canada, so the U.S. doesn't have to worry about it." Well, guess what? They do, because the U.S. provides the oversight for this. So again, another consideration. Then after that, you had a Southwest jet trying to land at Chicago Midway, and it did a go around, nearly colliding with a private plane on the runway. No injuries, no damage. It was a near miss. Again, people just asserted this with this sky is falling theory. But guess what? A few outlets reported that near misses are on the decline, especially the most serious Class A and Class B runway incursions, where you can almost have an accident. There were a spate of these incursions, I think 3 years ago. The FAA and the industry got together, and as a result, they've dropped down dramatically. This one particular one in Chicago just happened to happen after this spate, but there haven't been too many since. And overall, the number of runway incursions are going down, and people need to recognize that. Then you have all these little incidents that occur. We had a couple of airplanes at National where the wingtips hit each other. Probably not even substantial damage. Wingtips are excluded in the accident definition, but still, congressmen were on board, big time visibility, lots of news attention. And then just yesterday, I mean, even I was a bit shocked about this. There were 2 airplanes coming into National Airport that were asked to go around because an Army helicopter from the same unit that was involved in the January crash decided to do a sightseeing tour around the Pentagon. So, that there is some consistency there, and the NTSB is going to investigate it, and there may be more action to restrict the amount of traffic in Washington National. But overall, according to IATA, the International Aviation Transportation Association, worldwide, there's been significant decreases. We're talking in 2024. This is for the 2024 report, not 2025. But in 2024, 5 billion passengers transported at over 40 million flights, and commercial aviation remained really safe. High-profile events such as the Jeju accident in South Korea and the Azerbaijan Airlines crash, which was really a shoot down, have drawn global attention. They remain outliers in an industry where millions of passengers travel safely every day. And kind of up there in the top right, it talks about the Japan Airbus that landed and hit a Coast Guard airplane. It talked about the blowout, the Alaska Airlines door blowout. But again, the door blowout didn't kill anybody, but still, it spurred a lot of interest in not only the design of the airplane, but production issues. Then April 10th, 2025, we had a midair collision in, excuse me, not a midair collision. We had a helicopter come apart and killing a family of 5. And the New York Times wrote an article. They called me up to get a quote on, talking about how unsafe aviation is. And I pointed them to databases that the NTSB had and safety studies that have been done. I pointed them to the U.S. helicopter safety team, and they wrote a pretty good report, mixing and matching and talking about the difference between a Part 91 helicopter air tour company compared to Part 121 commercial aviation accidents. And they compared the rate, and you can just see here, right? You've got for the commercial airlines, and this is from the New York Times article, the fatal accident rate is 0.0003 per 100,000 flight hours. But then you've got for helicopters, the civilian helicopters, not air tours, look how much higher the fatal accident rate is, right? 0.69, 0.7. So from 0.003 to 0.7. And that's because the flying public and commercial aviation, the FAA puts so much more oversight on that people need to recognize you can't just lump all of this together. And then the article talked about, okay, I'm sorry. So yeah, I should have showed this before when I was talking about it. That same article talked about how important are the different rules. And then finally, the final paragraph, they asked me, how do you know if a helicopter air tour is safe? And I said, before you book, do your research. It's a lot of buyer beware when you're not flying on commercial airlines, because again, the FAA surveillance is so high. As part of this report, I also sent them some accident statistics. Again, one might say helicopter accidents are on the increase. Guess what? They're not. Here you see estimated rotorcraft accident rate has fallen dramatically since 22, but when you call out just the fatal ones, they have temporarily gone up, and it's but within that band of average that you see there on the right-hand side. And then here's you can also break down statistics into various things. One of the reasons why the fatal accident rate of helicopters looks so big in this one, right? Because you see this last this little spike here from fiscal year 24 to fiscal year 25, is because look at this. Agriculture spraying fatal accident rate has gone up, but external load fatal accidents have gone down. And Part 135, that's your air medical and other helicopter charters, they pretty much remain the same. So there's different sectors of aviation, and that's important when you look at the data. It's all about data analysis. Here is from fiscal year 05 all the way to fiscal year 25. Look at the number of accidents that have been reducing. And the fatal ones, they've been about flat, but they certainly haven't gone up. And when you consider over 100,000 flights per day in the United States, it just amazes me that that we don't have these kinds of accidents. You've had 16,000 aviation accidents over the past 10 years, civil aviation accidents. And this is for all accidents. And you can see some of the charts there. They've been going down, right? And the worldwide commercial passenger accident rate has been going down. This is from the NTSB's website. And now it only goes to 2023, granted, but in the past 15 years, look at these fatal accidents per 100,000 flight hours. They're just incredibly low. But you will notice that for the less rigorous Part 135 on-demand charters, it's a little bit higher, but still pretty low. And then for general aviation in total, to include the private pilots flying their Cessnas, it's one accident per 100,000 flight hours. So statistics and data are very important. NTSB leads all investigations. The FAA is a party to the investigations and provides resources. So that's also very important. We have an independent accident investigation group here. Let me kind of skip. I'm just going to quickly skip forward towards the end here because I'm starting to run out of time. But there's two paths toward improving safety. One is reactive, that's accident investigation. And the other one is proactive, and that's flight data monitoring, pilot reporting, safety management systems. That's what has improved safety immensely. We still gain a lot out of accident investigation. That's not going anywhere. Although we are starting to turn into the Maytag repairman because they're happening less and less and less. So this is basically showing, the same thing. Fly, crash, fix, fly was the reactive way. We're now into the proactive way, and we're moving towards predictive. We're utilizing data from incidents, not accidents, to identify trends and reduce risk. Here's an example of a kind of a combination of the both. This was a UPS Airbus accident that crashed in Birmingham, Alabama on a non-precision approach at night. And both pilots were killed. And there were just only 2 people on board, the pilots. The probable cause was the unstabilized approach during which the crew failed to adequately monitor their altitude. The aircraft descended below the minimum descent altitude when the runway was not yet in sight, resulting in impact 3,300 feet short. Whole bunch of contributing factors here. Flight crew's failure to properly configure and verify the flight management computer, the captain's failure to communicate his intentions to the first officer, the flight crew's expectation bias that they would break out of the clouds at 1,000 feet, the first officer's failure to make the required minimum callouts, the captain's performance deficiencies, and finally, the first officer's fatigue. So there's a whole bunch in here. But guess what? The NTSB grabbed some of that ASIAS data and they looked at recorded air traffic data over a 3-year period of all airliners. And out of 1.4 million approaches at 31 airports that had a non-precision approach, they discovered that flights on precision approaches experienced only 1/3 of the rate of approaches to runways without precision. And they're, in other words, 1/3 the problems, 1/3 the being below glide path. So that spurred some recommendations. Safety costs money. So there's a balancing act for manufacturers to they could pay so much money for safety they'll be out of business. They have to consider hazards. They have to consider what is known as risk. They have to categorize these hazards and risks, right? This is the risk assessment, hazard severity from minimum to catastrophic. If you have a minimal risk, you don't have to do much to mitigate it. But if you have a catastrophic risk and it's extremely improbable, well, if it's extremely improbable, you don't have to worry about it as much as it is a probable risk. So this is how manufacturers use that to define risk. And then you've got James Reason, right? The definition of is a failure of complex technologies operating in hazardous conditions comprised of defenses, barriers, and safeguards designed to protect people. That's what his definition of a mishap is. And so this is the classic Swiss cheese where all the holes line up between all the different factors. And that's what happened in Washington, D.C., in my view. There were so many things that lined up. I could go through a few other events like this. These were incidents now. This could have been a massively tragic accident. This is an Air Canada jet that was just about to touch down at night on San Francisco on a taxiway and barely missed 4 other airplanes that were getting ready to line up. No accident, but came within 13 feet of striking that second airplane. And then this was from surveillance camera. Well, I won't show that. Looks like it's not playing. Here we go. excuse me. Yeah, I could show this. So here's an actual oh, nope, that didn't work. Nope, that's not working either. Okay, that's all right. So let me just so that near miss, appropriately, the NTSB launched a GO team. And this was the probable cause: flight crew's misidentification of taxiway C, and which resulted in the crew members' lack of awareness on the parallel runway and their ineffective review of NOTAMs that were issued. And there were a bunch of contributing factors, to include expectation bias, fatigue, breakdowns in crew resources, and Air Canada's ineffective presentation of approach procedures and NOTAM info. Just a quick mention about SMS, Safety Management Systems. You really should know what this is, because has everything to do with safety now. It's mandated in commercial airliner, and it basically involves identifying hazards using flight data management, line-oriented safety training, accident incident investigation, incident reporting, ASAPs, hazard reports, surveys, inspections, and audits, change management. All of that is very important, and it's being rolled up now. And as a result, your hazard identification, then you do risk analysis and assessment, then you mitigate the unacceptable risk. And this is all part of a system where you have management making sure all of this is happening. And that's what happens. I'm going to skip through these because I'm running out of time. It was a Burbank accident that led to this thing called EMAS. That it is now off the end of the runway at Burbank and other short runways. It stops an airplane in kind of this breakable concrete before it runs off the end of the runway. And as I get to the end here, here's another chart showing U.S. air carrier fatalities and how they've decreased over the years, right? With the advent of pressurized aircraft, radar, jet engines, TCAS, flight management systems, cabin safety. And then you can see here voluntary safety programs, safety management systems, and the institution of CAST. And the number of lives lost in air carrier fatalities have just plummeted. And here's another similar chart showing elements of SMS affecting airline safety. And this goes to 2025, but SMS became a requirement there, and it's really bringing the number of fatalities almost down to zero. This is a picture of me. It was on the AIAA announcement, and I just wanted to talk a little bit about it. This is a Garuda 737 dual engine power loss. Here it is flying in some bad weather. It was hail ingestion caused both engines to flame out, and these pilots were able to ditch the airplane in a river, and only one person was killed. They had no engine power, a dead stick landing, breaking out of the clouds about 5,000 feet and landing. And this hailed back to previous events in which hail ingestion was an issue. But when this accident happened, those engines were upgraded, but they happened again. So they upgraded the engines again, and recommendations came out of it. So aviation accidents are going down. When you compare aviation to car accidents, there's like not even a comparison. It just amazes me that the public and the news media doesn't make more of this. That there is a person killed every 15 minutes on average in an automobile, but in aircraft, there's a fatality on average every day. Actually, it's less than that. And most of those the vast majority of those fatalities are single engine airplanes. So I'm getting tired of talking here. So I'm just going to sum up with where I began. The state of aviation safety is excellent. Despite recent accidents, the long-term trend has been decreasing. Accidents spur action by the industry. Because these airline accidents are so rare, they get massive attention. But you have to remember that every single day there's tens of thousands of commercial airline accidents or commercial airline flights that take off and land without a problem. It's getting a lot more attention than it did 20 years ago because everyone has an iPhone, everyone's taking pictures for viral video. There is, we need to be vigilant about being complacent, but and we got to just keep forward with data analytics using machine learning, artificial intelligence, SMS to improve safety, to continually improve it. And that's it. And I'm going to stop share here. Let me see if I can. Am I still on with you?
We still see you, Jeff. I might be able to stop your screen share directly.
Okay. I can't even see myself.
Yeah, it's the give me 1 second, Jeff.
Sure.
Okay, now we can see you. All right, well, thank you, Jeff. Thank you for the excellent presentation. We have a couple of questions in the Q&A.
All right.
The first one we'll talk about goes back to the the consumer protection awareness side. How is an operator able to sell tickets, do a tour for compensation under Part 91?
That is a great question. And it's a question I've asked for years. When I was even when I was at the NTSB and I led investigations of Part 91 air tour accidents, I asked, there's no oversight of this, right? The only thing a Part 91 air tour operator has to do is register with the local FAA office and get a letter of authorization, just so the FAA knows that they're operating. I don't think they should be allowed to do it. The FAA does require a drug testing program for the Part 91 operator, and they're supposed to pop in once or twice a year and do a ramp inspection. But none of their maintenance manuals need to be approved. None of their pilots need to have an approved FAA approved or accepted operating manual. It's just because the FAA is trying to strike a balance between promoting aviation and allowing people to enjoy air tours without overburdening those companies with regulation. Now, the only Part 91 air tour operators, they have to take off and land and not fly beyond a 25 nautical mile radius. That's their restriction. But still, I don't think that should allow them to operate with the kind of low-level Part 91 lack of oversight. So I don't really know why the FAA is doing that. The NTSB has many recommendations regarding that, and the response by the FAA has been unacceptable. So they're just going to have to bear the brunt of whatever blame they get on subsequent Part 91 accidents.
Yes, I know that has been one of the NTSB's recent talking points, is the same standard of safety for anybody who buys a ticket. Another question from John. From a new private pilot, is expectation bias a consistent factor, and is it in any way related to training deficiencies, or is it simply parallel complacency?
Yes, and both. So yes, expectation bias is prevalent in a lot of general aviation accidents. Yes, it is directly tied to the quality of your flight training. But it's also tied to a pilot's desire to want to learn more, have more discipline, get instruction, get biannual flight reviews, and read up on aviation safety. But yes, expectation bias is very prevalent in that human factor environment of you expect something and you don't see it, and then you're in this. You have to either change your mindset over the circle to land, runway approach, or whatever, or you're going to be kind of shocked and startled, and it may cause you not to do something that's safe. So yes, expectation bias is big. Flight instruction quality can affect that, And it's all part of the broader human factors issues that in which 80%, 85% of GA accidents fall under.
Okay, and we have two more in the Q&A. First one is, I think this is related to the mid-air collision from January. And do we know, and could someone, and it should a member of the public know, do we know if what systems were on board the aircraft, such as TCAS, ground proximity warning system, etc.?
Yes, we do know what was on board. The airliner had TCAS, and it did alert the fact that there was a helicopter there just a few seconds before the collision. But these TCAS alerts are, I want to say, muted when they get below 900 feet, because at that point you're so close. There's other airplanes around. You're so close to the runway you're going to land that it won't distract the pilot by saying pull up or descend, or it will display an alert on the screen. But at that point, it was too late. They both the airliner also had ADS-B, but the helicopter had ADS-B but was not using it for security reasons. They turned it off. And now the FAA says you can't do that anymore. You got to keep it on. And in fact, in yesterday's near miss, the Army helicopter had its ADS-B on. So we do know what equipment was on there, but still, now you have to figure out what exactly was the how helpful was the equipment in this particular instance of the mid-air collision. So the NTSB will look into that. Speaking of equipment, they said there's evidence to indicate that the helicopter was about 75 feet above its 200-foot altitude that it should have been at. And that 75 feet is what made the difference in the collision. But there's confusion as to what exactly did the pilots in the helicopter think they were flying at, because there might have been some bad data coming off of the barometric altitude. There's some mismatch in there that was seen in the helicopter's flight data recorder. So again, you can't just throw the pilot under the bus. There's going to be multiple factors involved here, and I will also tell you my own personal view is I think one of the main causes of that accident is going to be not on the controller or the pilot. It's going to be on the airspace design and the system and the failure of FAA or others to recognize that these two paths were always so close to each other with the increasing volume of National Airport. But with regards to the hardware, yeah, the NTSB knows what was on board.
Thank you. We have one more question in Q&A, and this relates back to the FAA's role in this whole process. So after the San Francisco incident that we mentioned here at the end, as someone at the FAA, you and your colleagues, what would you go back to, say, redesign charts, NOTAMs, etc.? How would that work on the regulator side?
Oh, well, as a result of that one, the regulator, it's taken too long, but they're completely overhauling the NOTAM system. And they're coming up with not only a much more reliable system, and I think this was just announced, but they're coming up with a way where pilots can better digest the volumes of information that come in from notices to airmen. Excuse me. So that's one issue. Another issue is flight scheduling for pilots. Now, Air Canada, I believe they wouldn't have been, their crew rest rules were less rigorous than the FAA's crew rest rules. So there was a recommendation there for the Canadians to make it more consistent with the US's, because there were fatigue issues. And then there was discussion about changing air traffic controllers' role and procedures for landing at San Francisco at night. There were certain procedures. The approach procedure kind of lent itself for this expectation bias. So there were immediate changes there also. And I'm just trying to think of, and then finally, just the fact that they looked back again at approaches coming into San Francisco, especially when there was a runway that was out of service, and they found, some problems there where it didn't, there were near misses, maybe not as dramatic as the one I just showed you, but enough to say, you know what, we've got to do something about redesigning the approach, redesigning the airspace, restricting certain categories at night, and all of those things have been implemented.
Thank you. Now we do have at least one person interested in asking a live question. Would that be permissible?
Sure, you bet.
Give me 1 second. You should see a notification that you have permission to talk. So I'll go ahead and do that. Santush, I think that was you. Okay. Santush might not have a working microphone.
Are you allowed to talk?
Should be able to. Yeah. There we go. How about that?
I heard someone.
I don't know what happened there, but outstanding presentation, sir. That was very, very good. So thank you. Great briefing. A couple questions here. One, just to piggyback on the previous one about the 135 versus Part 91 for hire for pay for tours and so forth. I always remember from the security clearance world that having a security clearance is insufficient. You always have to marry it up with a program clearance. So I always thought that it's a similar deal, that having a commercial pilot certificate is not sufficient. You have to marry it up with a Part 135 or 121. That's what this truly stunned me, to learn that you can marry up a commercial pilot certificate, which is required to fly for hire, with a Part 91 operation. The only time that I know that you don't have to have a commercial pilot certificate is for flight instruction, ironically. So that's the reason I was a bit confused about that. And
No, good question. Yeah, it kind of shocks me too, because you're correct. People are paying money. The public trust is being violated here. If an aviation operator is hanging out to say, pay me money and I will fly you, there should be the oversight should be greater than Part 91. Now, I will tell you that I do believe these Part 91 air tour operations or Part 91 sightseeing operations, I think you do have to have a commercial pilot's license. Even though you're not following Part 135 or 121, you still have to have a commercial pilot's license to earn money. So I would, I'd have to look into. I'm almost certain of that, but God, if I'm wrong, then I'm really shocked. But in any event, what was your second question?
well, before I get to the second question, I believe you are correct. The only exception I was saying was that I just learned recently for flight instruction, you do not have a commercial, even though you are being paid for flight instruction. That's something I learned recently, which also stuck on the flip side.
Yeah. Is that a recent change?
No,
Because I always thought you had to have.
but there are restrictions as far as what kind of instruction you can do. I think, just like with
Yeah.
but it was that. I mean, these are just two anomalies in the regulation that truly stunned me.
Well, just before, and also, I will let you know that I think beginning next year, you won't even need if you already have a private pilot's license, and you have a medical, FAA third class medical or whatever, beginning next year, you won't even need a medical anymore. You can just use your driver's license to fly under light sport aircraft rules with airplanes that weigh as much as a Cessna 172. So the FAA has done this by looking at whether or not they can loosen up the rules for private airplanes. I'm not talking about the air tours. And we'll see where that goes. Basic med. Now they're going to go to just your driver's license, just like a glider pilot doesn't need a medical. So the FAA, it's mitigation. They're mitigating their risks because they do have this dual role of trying to make aviation safer, but they want to promote aviation and grow it as a business. So and sometimes those two concepts clash with each other.
You're right about that with the basic med that already is a removed requirement for a medical certificate, but you have to go through some self-certification procedures. It's not just you have a driver's license; you have to still do some additional things.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is next year you won't even have to do that. You won't have to get a medical exam. If you have a driver's license and you pass the medical I think within the last 5 or 10 years, you're good to go.
My second question has to do with the idea of aviation being a lot more safer than driving. I was told by our FAA safety program manager, FPM, from our FSDO that that is a bit misleading because that only applies for Part 121 and Part 135 maybe, but for Part 91, it's actually 7 times more likely to end up in a fatal mishap than driving, is what he said.
I would agree with him. He is correct. And this is how statistics can be misleading. I showed you that slide there, but you're correct. Flying 121 and 135 is much safer when you look at the rate, the amount of time you spend in in an airline, or the amount of departures or flights, or but when you look at Part 91 operations, the private pilots and the hundreds of thousands of flights, there's so many more of those types of airplanes. You're correct. The time you spend in a small airplane with a private pilot under Part 91, it is about 7 times greater risk of dying than if you're just in your car, because you don't require 2 pilots. You don't need, there is no FAA oversight, and you have private pilots out there that fly into bad weather and do things that they shouldn't do. And so I stand corrected there. That's a great point.
The one thing that is being done is programs like FAA Safety Team, is that one of the big differences is also training and recurrency requirements. Under Part 91 strictly, all you got to do is a flight review and 3 takeoffs and landings to a full stop if you're at nighttime, or not even that for daytime. And that's pretty much it, as long as you have a current medical or whatever. But the airlines, military, and so forth, they have more frequent check rides and so forth. And so they're trying to bring that model, as you are well aware, with FAA Safety Team, by distributing your recurrent training throughout the year, and with 3 flight events and 3 ground events, so that you are making it more like the airlines. So that's kind of what's being done to try to address that.
Absolutely. Not the fast team and the credits you get, like for watching this, are, I think, great things that the FAA does. It's voluntary, right? But it helps mirror the rigor of a commercial airline.
One quick plug: you don't have to be a pilot or airman yet to join FAA Safety Team and become a member or register for an account. And that's a good thing, because you get notified about these type of seminars and webinars, and eventually, once you do become a pilot, it'll give you a lot of knowledge ahead of time, even if it doesn't.
Absolutely. Yeah, I get those email alerts. In fact, I just got one this morning talking about ForeFlight, which is an app I have to help me go flying. I fly, and it says the tricks and trades of using ForeFlight and functions. FAA fast team presentation webinar. It costs nothing, and you can log on and learn a lot. So
one of the things we're trying to do is we're trying to, with this program, is get the FAA Safety Team and AIAA married together with this, so that we can have a little bit of cross pollination. Because what's been happening historically is pilots don't talk to the engineers don't talk to the pilots, to result in boneheaded decisions. And on the flip side, you got pilots, I don't care about engineering, I don't even know about that. Whereas every automotive engineer drives to work, so they have an idea, a basic idea, what is a good design, a bad design is for a car. That doesn't necessarily happen in the flying world, and so that's what we're hoping to achieve by having awareness of both programs.
Yep, I agree.
Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Thank you. And I think that is all of the questions we have.
Is there any more in Q&A?
There is not any more in the Q&A. Ken,
Okay. Yeah, Luis is joining, so maybe he want to say something.
Yeah, we certainly have some time. And also, while we're waiting, if there are any other questions, I did see something in the chat. Oh my God, there's 45 comments in the chat.
many of them are people's email address for the safety team credit.
Oh, I see. So, but there is one that popped up about, can we have the slides for this presentation? Yes. And the answer is yes. After we end here, I will send Ken and Daniel a copy of my PowerPoint slides. It'll be a PDF copy, and it'll also allow me to, those ones I skipped through, to kind of remove those, or some extraneous ones. I'll make sure it's ready for publishing, ready for prime time, and I'll send that to you guys. And then if you could distribute it to your membership, that would be great.
Okay, we do have one person with a hand raised. See if I can find them here. Cameron, give me 1 second. I can
Sure.
scroll up to the top. Actually, search. There we go. Okay,
Thank you.
Cameron. Cameron, you should be live. If you're not, say something in the chat. Okay, we do have however, Cameron, we do have one question in the chat. How can legislation and law push secure systems to military and air vehicles? Not sure.
Maybe I could ask her to speak up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Andrea, I'm gonna promote you here because I am not sure of how to ask that question.
Yeah.
All right, you should be able to speak if you wish. But other than that, oh, here's a good question. Jeff, as someone who's done it, what are the requirements to work for the NTSB?
Well, the NTSB is hiring.
Yes, they are.
But they do have different requirements. It depends on the position, right? So if you want to be a field investigator, there's 60 of those. They're the one-person go teams that do the small accidents. You have to at least be a pilot, be a certified pilot, and then you have to have some aviation safety experience. They have intern programs if you're a college student, and they just require for the interns just a passion for aviation safety. But then to be hired into directly as a full-time person, you need some aviation safety experience. Now, I got hired with an aeronautical engineering degree, and I became a systems specialist for the NTSB on the GO team, looking at aviation systems and structures. So if you have a specialty, then they could also use you. A former air traffic controller, former airline pilot, maybe a meteorologist, maybe a human factors psychologist. But for those engineers out there, they need structures engineers, systems engineers, power plants specialist, and but they need some industry experience before they'll hire you off the street. And all of their requirements are posted on their website. Just go to ntsb.gov, hit jobs, and it will have all of their open positions. Some are field investigators, which is where I started. Others are specialists. So it just depends.
Also, I have a follow-up question. How does it affect you looking at all these accidents, flying commercially? And I don't know if you fly for yourself.
I do. I fly both on commercial airlines, and then I fly myself as a pilot. In fact, I'm renting a small airplane on Monday to go flying around the DC area. Commercial airlines, I have no fears, no concerns. I know the odds of me getting hurt in a commercial airline worldwide is much less than getting struck by lightning. I used to not have any fear flying myself either, because I learned from all these GA accidents that the vast majority of these accidents are caused by pilots that don't do a proper pre-flight. They don't check the fuel in their wings. They get a weather report, but they still launch into instrument conditions when they're not in. So I know that I won't be like that. I'm a fair weather flyer. I always do a pre-flight. But I got to tell you, now that I'm getting older and I have kids, and I'm not going to fly myself or my family unless I go up with an instructor first, or make sure I have a biannual flight review, make sure I have some recency experience. But again, so it's my own risk assessment that I'm conducting there. But generally, I love to fly as a pilot, a GA pilot, and I have no fears about flying for the airlines, despite the carnage that I've seen. Because in the end, I know what causes those accidents, or would learn what caused them, and that makes me a much better pilot.
I feel the same way. Thank you so much.
Sure.
One question in the chat, Jeff. And I think I can speak to it as well. The question is, does NTSB hire A&P mechanics? I can't speak directly to the NTSB, but I do know manufacturers do. I mean, for accident investigation, manufacturers, for
Yes.
example, Textron, Cessna, Beechcraft, Bombardier, etc. I think they still have a rule where you have to have an A&P before they will hire you to their investigation team.
Absolutely. A&P license is critical when you work for, be an accident investigator for a company, a manufacturer. And most all aviation manufacturers have dedicated accident investigators. When it comes to the NTSB, you can't just have a mechanic's license. You got to be a pilot too. But a mechanic's A&P mechanic's license certainly makes you more marketable to the NTSB. There's one exception. The NTSB does have one or two aviation maintenance specialists on their Go team. So if you only have an airframe and power plant license and you have airline experience as a maintenance technician, and the NTSB needs a maintenance specialist, then there's another exception there where you can. Also, I just want to say, FAA aviation safety inspectors, the FIDFO inspectors, of which there's 3,800 of them, they need people also. And there's airworthiness inspectors where you need an A&P. There's operations inspectors where you need a commercial pilot's license. And then there's avionics inspectors and cabin safety inspectors.
All right, thank you. And then there's one question in the chat. This may speak to more of the ICAO rules for international party investigations. The question is mostly with the surplus military. So if the U.S. sells a old military transport to an allied country, or someone imports a MiG or an Eastern Bloc trainer, how does that complicate a civilian accident investigation?
Good question, because that happens every now and then. The ICAO rules still apply, right? So if someone in the United States gets a Russian Yak or a Russian aerobatic airplane or a fighter, and then begins to fly it in the United States and crashes, ICAO says that the state of design and manufacture, Russia, can play a role in the investigation. Now, I don't know the state of play recently. I think because of recent tensions between Russia and the U.S., the U.S. might ban providing assistance to Russia or letting Russia come in. Same with Iran and some other things. There might be some political concerns. But the ICAO rules generally apply, even in military surplus and older aircraft. If a U.S. Army surplus helicopter was sold to a South American country and the South Americans operated it in civilian capacity and it crashed in South America, well, then ICAO would say that Bell Helicopter or whoever manufactured the helicopter, whoever manufactured the engine, the U.S. should be a player in that investigation.
I remember recently there was a couple recently involving Iran where there was a Boeing 737 that was shot down, and I think someone from FAA did go out there. Maybe I'm mistaken about that.
Well, it might be. That probably didn't come under the ICAO Annex 13 rules. It probably just came under State Department. Hey, we need some technical assistance here. Can you help? Because it was a shoot down. It wasn't an accident.
And then a related question in the chat. How should cybersecurity issues be investigated? So if there was I'm not sure if this has come up in a civilian investigation yet, but if there's a cybersecurity question with the flight data, does the FAA and the NTSB have processes in place for that?
No, this whole issue about cyber, about someone sitting in the back hacking into the flight controls or just the security of the avionics on commercial airliners or of radar systems, that is a bit of an outlier. The FAA is starting to get smart on that. The guy that took over for me, Pat Hempen, he came from that world in his earlier career, and he led the FAA aviation safety team there. He was starting to interact with the whole cybersecurity community. In the civilian market, it's not nearly as mature as in the military market for ensuring security. But the NTSB really hasn't done much in that regard. If something came up and there was an accident that involved a cybersecurity issue, they would just put one of their engineers on it and try to get them to get smart on it. But right now, there really is no formal program.
And one more question in the chat, especially I think this would be good as you also worked at what was Cessna. I don't know if it was Textron at the time. Over the span of your career, do you think pilot proficiency, pilot skills have gone up, down, in aggregate, about the same?
I'm gonna just my visceral reaction to that is they've gone down, and just because I guess I rely on my own experience for that. I worked for the Cessna Aircraft Company in Wichita 25 years ago, and they had a flying club. They still do. It's dirt cheap to fly. Kansas is incredibly favorable for general aviation pilots, right? Lots of GA airports, big GA community. But now with, more and more airspace restrictions since 9/11, more and more security procedures, the expense involved in flying an airplane causes people to fly less. And I think we're seeing in some of these accidents, we're seeing a lack of pilot proficiency. So generally, I think there's been a decrease just because the access a flying GA has gotten harder and harder over the years.
Well, I do think that within the section here, our Los Angeles, Las Vegas section, I know at least a couple of this more GA airports have started installing chargers for electric aircraft. So if anybody listening, that might be a good way to practice fly the pattern without having to spend $10 a gallon on avgas.
Right. This whole eVTOL industry, the electric airplanes is it's going to take a while, but I really think it's I hope it takes off, literally.
All right, Jim.
Yeah, hey Jeff, just to comment on that, I happen to work at a company that's creating hydrogen-powered electric engines, and spent 22 years at the big brother just down the road who makes airplanes that start with a B and end with a G. And this is a refreshing change for someone trying to do something new and interesting, but it's not tomorrow's technology. It's further down the road to get the hydrogen fuel cell embedded into the aircraft. So right now we're just trying to work on making the electric motor fit into the aircraft. And it's pretty interesting. It's really cool to work with people who are really passionate about this greening of the aerospace industry, but it's a long road to hoe.
I completely agree. I'm looking forward to it. I've done seminars. I've written articles about UAM, urban air mobility, and electric airplanes, and vertical takeoff and landing, eVTOL, they call them, electrical. I think it will come to fruition, and you're right. Even for larger aircraft, they're looking at hydrogen power. The tech just isn't there yet to make the investment worth it in terms of operationally worth it, but it's moving in that direction, and I think it's extremely exciting in aviation.
Hey, just to follow up on that previous question about skills, pilot skills. What I was really this is Kurt again. Sorry, but
it's okay.
The question was really about, are we more in danger now as we fly Part 121 or even Part 135 because the pilot skills are more about systems management as opposed to really knowing how the airplane flies and having had a whole bunch of practice in flying, and therefore being able to pull out those necessary skills when the time becomes necessary, which is very rare, but they need to be there.
Yes and no. So you're certainly correct. In fact, I used to work for the Inspector General's office, and we did an audit on flight crew automation for the airlines, and how automation, makes things safer in one sense, but when things do go wrong and they have to hand fly it, They don't have the kind of currency or feel for it like the older pilots had. And so I don't think it's made things more dangerous, because it certainly has made it a concern. But because of the two pilot concept in the cockpit, because of newer generation technology in airplanes, that has mitigated that fear to a bit, for a bit. But it is something that we need to be vigilant of, is the complacency, plus the demographic of pilots coming into the airlines. They're no longer well-trained military pilots. They're mostly civilian now, that don't have as much of a robust training platform on which to jump on. But still, the industry has morphed to compensate for that, whether it be through training, through better training devices, and with the two-person cockpit and procedures. It is a concern, but I don't think it's made 135 or 121 more dangerous.
I think we have one more. I think we have time for one more question. Santosh, I see your hands raised.
Yeah, just to piggyback that point, whether it be electronic flight badge as ForeFlight or Garmin Pilot, whatever, or technically advanced airplane glass cockpits, or even BRS systems, ballistic recovery systems, those tools have to be taught how to be used properly within their proper operating envelopes. Because there have been numerous, or at least I know of one, but possibly numerous cases where Cirrus aircraft, which are famous for having BRS, but people realize the reason they had to have BRS is that was the only way they could get certified to compensate for some other handling qualities issue, if I'm mistaken. But because of that, though, people who are not properly trained, they would pull the chute, the BRS chute, before when it was outside of the recovery envelope, causing the chute to rip off because of too much airspeed or whatever. So that's not a catch. Same with ejection seats. You have to know the envelope and operate within those envelopes, not just blindly use them, whether it be that or the technically advanced equipment, iPads, EFBs, or glass cockpits and so forth. Otherwise, they can actually cause more of a hindrance rather than actually advancing safety.
Absolutely. You can't just rely on advanced technology. You got to train to it and have the proper procedures for it. You don't just slap it on the airplane. So I concur with that.
And
go ahead, Satish. Do you have any more to add there? Or sorry, I may have stepped on you.
Oh, sorry, that was a little bit of PIO on my part there. Sorry.
Okay. No, and one more thing on say, especially with the ballistic parachutes, if you have an aircraft that in one is retrofitted on, make sure people know, because if I'm if I or Jeff or somebody's an investigator, we walk up to an airplane that doesn't usually have a ballistic parachute and it didn't go off, and we start, looking into it, taking it apart, that's a potential bomb that could go off during the investigation. So make sure you paint it on the side, tell your FSDO, etc. And Jeff, actually, we have one quick question.
Yeah.
Does it concern you, as a safety professional, if people are going to the Air Traffic Control Academy working in the tower without being a pilot? I don't think that's ever been a rule, but.
Oh, no, it doesn't concern me. Many controllers are pilots, but you don't need to be a pilot. You need a special skill of envisioning things moving in 3D with vectors and speeds, and it would be helpful, but absolutely not required. The best controllers aren't pilots. They're people that just can process information quickly in terms of speed and vectors and everything like that.
A final quick question, if I may, regarding what you just said. I know we just said, let's kind of look in the future. What are the prospects of AI, artificial intelligence, augmenting air traffic control to help with the workload, not to replace it, but to augment and assist?
I think it's happening. I think, in fact, Secretary Duffy has already indicated that they're going to, AI is not a panacea. It's not going to be the end all, but it is certainly going to be very helpful to assist air traffic controllers in the flesh or in live, as they perhaps provide hints to controllers about the vectors and where they might be. But yeah, I think there will be a role to play there. I think you're always going to have a controller in the loop, at least during my lifetime. But AI and machine learning is going to help them.
Okay, there's actually one more quick question here. interesting one for me as well, because I don't know all the ins and outs of it. But now especially with the existence of TSA and FAA no longer taking the lead in the civil aviation security role, what role does the FAA have right now in civil aviation security and assurance risk?
Sure. So FAA is still is in charge of security in the cockpit, flight deck security, right? The double doors and the all that stuff. They're also in charge of security of FAA facilities, control towers, not airports, not on the airport, but the actual FAA control tower, the VORs. They're in charge of that also. But you're right. They're no longer in charge of airport security, passenger security. That's TSA and local law enforcement. So now it's just flight deck security, making sure your pilots are vetted, making sure the bad guys can't get in the cockpit, making sure you got the federal firearm. Some pilots carry a firearm and they're vetted, and then protecting the FAA owned infrastructure.
Ken, you have a question?
Oh, Jeff, I have an issue because I was listening to some pilots comment about the helicopter incident. They said it seems that the dual rotor for helicopter might be safer than the single rotor for hitting the tail boom. Is that true?
Well, that would certainly eliminate the problem. To have counter rotating props. I mean, you need a tail boom on most helicopters to a tail rotor blade. But still, there's other. I mean, there's it would be kind of expensive to do that, and there'd be design challenges and expense involved. So you fix one problem, but you're adding another problem.
That's right. I see.
This helicopter accident that happened over New York, it really is a mystery. This thing called mast bumping, but we don't think it was that because the whole gearbox got ripped out of the main rotor. So, and when you watch it on video, it looked like something happened with that tail boom. It just structurally failed. You have different types of designs like no tail rotor, the no tar, where they use a vent to direct the torque. And then you've got command helicopters has two counter rotating main rotor blades, and they don't need much of a tail. They don't need a tail rotor. So there are unique designs, but again, it's a design. You got to consider form, fit, function, the cost, the marketability of that.
Yeah, my second question is, it just explained the AI issue. As you know, here we have a company called Skyrise.
Yes.
They just succeeded the Skyrise one, the first swipe. Do you think that kind of thing, kind of help for the safety issue, or actually is not going to be helpful?
No, I think it is going to be helpful. I think that's going to be a revolutionary. In fact, a former NTSB board member, Landsberg, what's Bruce Landsberg? He's on the board, and the former, she just retired, Lirio Liu, former director of FAA aircraft certification, is also on on the board there, I believe. So it's a way to use computers and AI to simplify the complex maneuvers, flight control inputs you need for a helicopter. And I think it's not ready for prime time yet, but I think it will add to the safety again as long as it's implemented properly and in the proper phases of flight.
Yeah, because this year our section will give Skyrise our Technical Excellence Award. Our section chief, Luis, he's online. He will mention it a little bit. Maybe you can join us online, to cheer for them.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. I keep up with Skyrise.
Okay.
I read what they do, and it's all looking good.
Very good. Luis, do you want to ask a question?
No questions necessarily for me, just some closeout administrative comments.
Okay, we are not closing yet.
Right. So I'll hold.
Okay. Luis is our section chair.
Oh.
Daniel is our public policy chair.
Yeah.
John, there's John and Santosh.
I think we have a couple more questions. Go ahead. I think you can both unmute yourselves if you wish.
Real quick comment about the Skyrise thing. Having known some of the test pilots and others who work for Skyrise, there's a misconception that Skyrise is to fully automate the helicopter operation. That's not really it. What was explained to me was it's to remove some of the nasty flight characteristics away and automate those aspects of it, but not the entire operation. So still going to be flying it away, but if it helps, it's more like a bit like a stability augmentation type. Is really what
hovering and the initial takeoff and initial landing. Yep.
And John?
Yeah, he has a mic.
Should have the mic now, John. Give him a shot.
Yeah, so my question is concerning space debris. Do you see that there is a concern with the increased amount of space debris coming through the atmosphere and reaching the surface that a commercial aircraft or an aircraft could be hit by that and cause an accident? I haven't really heard too much from the aviation community on this concern of potential space debris coming through, or is it maybe, has it happened before and we didn't even know it for some of the unexplained accidents that have happened? And I'll close it out on that.
Sure. No, good question. I can tell you that the FAA is aggressively for commercial space launches are happening once a week now. And the FAA absolutely cordons off airspace in case the rocket blows up on its way out. Now, that's one aspect, and I think that's being mitigated properly. The other aspect is there is a lot of space junk up there. And so your question is, as the orbits decay and they enter the atmosphere, could that be a hazard to aviation? I'm not sure about that. I don't know how often that occurs. I think that they do have a pretty good beat on space debris, and if they can get some timely warning, but I don't think it's ever been involved in an accident. And I think it is a rising concern due to the proliferation of commercial space and the proliferation of space junk hitting other satellites and things like that. But I'm not, that's really about all I can say about that.
Yes, I know the FAA has been aggressive with their closing airspace and such, especially with the latest Starship tests where they've needed to close down the Caribbean and also close down some airspace in the Indian Ocean because that's where it's supposed to land. And I know it's been a story recently about a few Qantas flights from I think Sydney to Johannesburg who have had to been canceled because that's where they fly. So
airlines do not like this, right? They don't like having their airspace shut down suddenly, but it's a way to mitigate risk.
Okay, Luis, I think we can have those administrative points if you're still on.
Yes, thank you, Daniel. Yeah, so I guess
can we ask one last question?
Okay.
Yeah, I just typed it in and then you started talking again. So I just typed it in. It's about the National Airspace System and autonomous drones. Now that I haven't really kept up with it. 8 years ago, when I was working in that space, they were making plans and presentations to the FAA about carving out certain airspace, maybe corridors, maybe below 400 feet AGL. All of it seemed very disruptive to me as a private pilot. And I just wondered, is the FAA going one direction or another, or what has happened in the last 8 or 10 years?
It's exactly what you said. They do have been carving out corridors. It's a location by location basis. These corridors should not come. They'll be under 400 feet. The corridors will not be near airports, and it seems to have worked. Again, this is another, and now they're even going to beyond visual line of sight. And for some of these corridors, it's an evolution. Crawl, walk, run, and we're a long way from running. I don't think you're going to see any autonomous passenger service. You might see autonomous cargo service over the ocean, but for these smaller drones, Amazon and the like, they're becoming more and more frequent. But I think that they're maintaining the level of safety. I don't think private pilots should worry too much about it. You just don't. Everyone, when these drones came out, everyone thought that there was going to be a huge hazard. But as it turns out, it really hasn't been. You can count on one hand how many drones have struck an aircraft over the past few
The
years.
host would like you to speak.
The host would like me to speak? Okay. Thank you for the answer. I guess that's not really all that satisfying to me because we have the same issue with the drones as we had with the Potomac helicopter versus commuter jet issue. It's like someone's responsible for staying in his airspace, and does he really do it? And it may be the pilot, the actual hand flying pilot, who makes the mistake and veers into the carve outs for the drones. But are we requiring all drones to always be able to see and avoid the others?
No, and I think comparing it to the Washington, D.C. one is these carve outs are not near airports, right? They know better than that. They know that drones can fly away. There's no pilots on board. So you're never going to see a Amazon delivery drone route embedded into the underneath an airport like you did with the helicopter route and the PSA airline. So the FAA is very ultra conservative about who they allow to fly, where these corridors are, almost to the point where they get a lot of pressure from Congress because their constituents are trying to make money by having these Amazon flights go everywhere, deliver burritos. And the FAA's like, we're not going to do it. We're going to crawl, walk, run. And I think so far they've been very successful at that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
that sounds good. Part 103 becomes a problem because those are places not near the airports. You might do powered parachutes. You might be doing ultralights, and you are in that space, and you're allowed to be very, very low. And another place might be aerial spraying, very low. So those are the things where I go, that's just a recipe for disaster, unless it's very well controlled and there's a ton of education on all sides.
Yeah, well, I can just tell you the statistics haven't deemed out that it's a disaster. Yes, those types of accidents do occur every now and then, but in my view, there's bigger fish to fry than to worry about that. It's just my view.
Right on. Thanks.
All right. Kenneth, you have one question I saw it in the Q&A, but I think you're on to speak.
Dr. Zalai?
Yes. Do you copy?
Copy.
Great program to you all. I'm the past director of the NASA Armstrong Flight Research Center.
Wow.
And over the years, we've done a lot of research in all areas of aeronautical and space technology. But specifically right now at this time, can you think of some areas that NASA ought to invest in from the standpoint of safety, especially for commercial airline operations, since that involves the most number of people? Thank you.
Yeah, boy, great question. I know that NASA's already been involved with helping the FAA with this whole urban air mobility, right? And the
Yes.
use of drones, huge help. In terms of commercial airline safety, again, NASA, as you I'm sure could say in the past, have done all kinds of research, lightning strikes, TCAS, ground proximity warning systems, meteorological things. I guess I guess NASA should continue to help with this as things become more and more autonomous. See and avoid technology, traffic collision avoidance, better technology. That's when I look at aviation safety. And then finally, probably the biggest one is human factors. Fatigue. I know NASA's done fatigue studies, human factors, all kinds of how do you design your instruments in a glass cockpit to be better. So, and I'm confident that research is still coming. I hear about budget cuts to that, which makes me sad. But I think human factors, collision avoidance are two aspects that NASA can continue to help on.
Doctor, I can expand a little bit on that, especially with the commercial side. I know one thing that we're watching a lot is the supersonic transport, if there will be a rebirth in that. And especially and I know that you have the, I think it's the X-59, the silent boom that's Skunkworks is working on out there. I know I've actually had some of our students that are flying that right now, I think. And one concern is going to be the crew scheduling. If you can fly trans-Pacific in, under 6 hours, is an airline going to try to make that a in and out without an overnight in, say, Japan? Or is it going to be more the traditional like we have now, where you fly multi-person, 3 or 4 person crew overnight on the outstation and then come back? And that's going to be, if you can fly so many time zones, such a small amount of time, that's something that we haven't tried since Concorde, at least on the commercial side.
Yeah. Related to this, I would just say that I've been involved in digital fly-by-wire control since 1972. I was chief engineer of the first digital fly-by-wire program on the F-8 at NASA.
Oh, wow.
And over the years, automatic flight controls and all of the very sophisticated avionics and pilot assist functions we have in aircraft right now are amazing. But problems continue to pop up in the man-machine interaction. Miscommunication, misunderstanding, not understanding of how a system works. I just wonder what your thoughts have been in terms of seeing those kinds of incidents where the flight crew is doing their best. But I think we as systems engineers need to understand that we're dealing with the human being, not with another computer.
It's happening. In fact, it's probably on the top of the list for safety concerns for commercial airline safety. The Asiana crash in San Francisco.
Right. That's a good example.
Where the crew had all this automation, auto throttle, but they weren't plugged into it themselves. They didn't know that the auto throttle was engaged, but the flight level change wasn't, and we saw similar issues with United Airlines jet that took off out of Hawaii a couple of years
Right.
ago.
Yeah.
So the man-machine interface is incredibly important, especially when you go to more and more automation. Maybe it's more training, maybe it's better displays, but that is absolutely a concern. The human factor plugging into the automation.
I think it's a good point. And there, even the English language and words you use. We've done a very good job in air traffic control with certain vocabulary, things you don't say or should say. But in the case of Asiana, you had a mode and the auto throttle hold. So the question is for the flight crew, what is it holding? Is it holding speed or holding throttle position, which it was 0.
Right. Yep, that's right. There are a lot of lessons learned from that too. In fact, there's still discussion about mitigating that hazard and how best to mitigate hazards like that.
Thank you, Jeff. Good luck.
You're welcome. Thank you, sir. You're muted. Still
Thank you,
muted,
sir. That does point to one thing we also see more and more, which is the linguistics of aviation. Most pilots around the world, they don't learn English as we do. They learn aviation English, which is a very specific, defined subset of English that I have actually never studied. So I cannot say I'm fluent in aviation English. Luis, I think we are ready for those closing comments.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. So yeah, my name is Luis Cuevas. I'm the section chair for the AIAA LA section. First of all, thank you, Mr. Gazzetti, for your talk. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to come speak to us. Very interesting topic. Shout out to Ken and Daniel here for setting this up. My final comment is I'd like to invite everyone present here to our section awards dinner. This is an annual event. It's happening May 14th. Annual event where we celebrate, aerospace professionals, recognize people for achievements that they've done in service of AIAA, And also, Ken mentioned this previously. We'll be recognizing Skyrise for their technical achievements in our industry. So we're really excited about that. They're really excited. But again, that's May 14th. It's happening at the Cambria Hotel in close to the LAX airport. If you're local, please sign up, register for our event. If you're in our mailing list, you should be getting information about that, and that is the appropriate way that's the channel to register. So again, everyone's invited, and thank you all for today. I'll turn it back over to you, Ken and Daniel, for closing remarks.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Luis. Actually, there's also online option. Yeah, for as a souvenir to attendee today, the online attendance for May 14. Initially, there's a small amount for the online ticket, but for people here online, we can give you free. If you want to attend online, we can add you in for the online attendance. All right, so thank you so much, Jeff. Daniel, this is amazing, and thanks, Dr. Azalai, and everybody, and Luis, everyone. So thank you very much. Glad you are with us today. So we look forward to the next, aviation safety or launch safety event with you. Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you, Jeff. And for everybody, we'll leave the chat open for a little bit, in case anybody hasn't yet typed in their emails, but we are going to collect those and make sure we get those out to the proper people over at the FAA. But otherwise, thank you, Mr. Gazzetti. Any last words?
Thank you. It was a pleasure and a privilege. And Daniel and Ken, I will send you my PowerPoint presentation here shortly.
All right, thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right.
Thank you.
Awesome job, guys. Thank you.
Did you have a specific question, or you just opened it up for everybody to talk if they want?